John William Waterhouse lived from 1849 to 1917, born in the city of Rome to British painters William and Isabella Waterhouse. We know a good deal about Waterhouse's art, but very little about the man, since practically nothing is known of his private life. Almost no documentary evidence, letters, or diaries are known to exist. In 1883, Waterhouse married Esther Kenworthy, who had exhibited her own flower paintings at the Royal Academy and elsewhere. The couple occupied a studio at Primrose Hill Studios, an artist's community in North London. In his book, Bridle and Brush, George Armour writes, "There were 12 studios round a court, some of which were occupied by people of note. J.W. Waterhouse was one, Maurice Griffenhagen another, and others of us of less importance. It was a very happy little colony, and we had great fun outside our work." This is Waterhouse and his wife with the group of artists. Waterhouse's studio was a never-failing place of meeting, and he and his wife, the best of hosts, writes Armour. Waterhouse created paintings in the Romantic style, producing work mainly in oils. His canvases consist of realistic and natural settings. The artist's fascination with beautiful heroines and the femme fatale is unquestionable. Many of his paintings are based on stories from Homer. One of Waterhouse's most famous paintings is The Lady of Shalott, a study of Elaine of Astolat, who dies of grief when Lancelot will not love her. He actually painted 3 different versions of this character. Another of Waterhouse's favorite subjects was Ophelia. The most famous of his paintings of Ophelia depicts her just before her death, putting flowers in her hair as she sits on a tree branch leaning over a lake. Like The Lady of Shalott and other Waterhouse paintings, it deals with a woman dying in or near water. He may also have been inspired by paintings of Ophelia by Dante Gabriel Rossetti, and by this one, painted by Sir John Everett Millais. Waterhouse would paint Ophelia again in 1894 and 1909, and planned another painting in the series called Ophelia in the Churchyard, but could not finish the series of Ophelia paintings because he was gravely ill with cancer by 1915. He died 2 years later in 1917, and now rests with his wife Esther in a quiet corner of the Cemetery of All Souls in Kensal Green, London. His monument, a fine Portland stone headstone, is now in very poor condition, and the inscription is illegible. Friends of Kensal Green Cemetery are now seeking to preserve the Waterhouse grave for the future. This drawing, entitled Study for Miranda by Waterhouse, was auctioned on behalf of the appeal. The sale helped quite a bit, but additional funds were still needed at the time of this article written in 2011. This is the painting done from that study entitled Miranda. There's been much speculation about Waterhouse's mysterious models. The list of Waterhouse models has grown since only family members Jessie, Mary, and Esther Waterhouse were originally known about. Some names are now gladly known, but not the detailed stories that go with the individuals who sat before Waterhouse as he sketched or painted. Most of the names of the models are also ones that worked with other artists of the time. Hopefully more names and their stories will come to light in the future. There are over 100 known paintings by Waterhouse. He was one of the rare artists who became popular and relatively well off financially while he was still alive. He continued to paint until his death. Most of the information that I found about him was from the website jwwaterhouse.com and also from Wikipedia. You can see his paintings in the Harris Museum in England, the Art Gallery of South Australia, and the Art Gallery of Ontario. Peter Trippi describes the women in Waterhouse's works as an idealized, instantly recognizable type. Many of his subjects looked very similar, with auburn hair, and you see most of the paintings in these series included women holding roses. I bought a poster a few years ago at the Frist Museum in which I fell in love with his edges and skin tone. The painting in the poster was entitled "The Soul of a Rose" by John William Waterhouse. It isn't a scene taken from a famous or an ancient tale of love. Instead, it's a study of a woman in a garden, thought to be based on the work of Alfred Lord Tennyson. In this next segment, I'll take you step by step through my alla prima session. I painted one afternoon from about 3 p.m. until midnight, working wet into wet, taking some breaks. I'll take you step by step through images that I took throughout the day, narrating and talking a little bit about my process for painting. In this first image, you'll see my 24 by 36 toned canvas. I used cad red light, yellow ochre, and a mineral spirits wash, drawing with fine charcoal. I masked in the dark areas of negative space using short, broken marks. When you slow down and make shorter estimates in your marks, you'll note each angle change, getting a much more accurate drawing. I began to apply darks in the background in this next image, very thinly, noting texture and reflections in the darks. You'll get ridges and reflection in the background if you're not careful. I began working from the back, laying in textures and buildings. I used a palette knife in the light areas in an impasto manner. This is a close-up of the shelf at the bottom that the pottery is sitting on, and noting the downward and horizontal strokes that help to create form, just quickly laid in. The thin folds of the fabric you'll see here are applied with dark strokes. I roughly sketched in the bricks and noted the darkest and lightest light very early on. Here I've applied mid and light tones of the fabric, modeling strokes with the shoulder and upper arm in mind. There's no pattern or design at this point. My brushwork is applied very thinly with the tone showing through. In this next comparison slide, you can see that I'm not going into near the detail that Waterhouse painted with. With this being an alla prima session, I wanted to keep it very loose. I began adding some detail very loosely, almost rhythmically, not trying to measure or place things in order. I applied a few darks to the hair in this session. Here I masked in the hair with burnt sienna and raw sienna and a little cad red light. In this close-up, coming up next, you can see that I'm not thinking about strands at all, but I'm only thinking of and massing in the large areas of dark and medium and modeling around the head. Working fairly fast, this was about 2 hours into the painting with a few breaks. I began laying in skin tones in this image in about 2 values, just a few small areas of shadow using in the skin tone yellow ochre and white, and a yellow ochre and burnt sienna with white mixture. In this close-up, I've applied the paint, modeling my strokes around the form. I tell students to think of how you apply lotion or makeup to your face as you're laying these first strokes in. I've covered all the skin tones with about 3 values here, applied in a somewhat mosaical fashion. The darks have been applied to the lips and eyes in warm red tones, burnt sienna and Cameron light, and an old tube of scarlet that I mixed in on the lips and around the nostrils and cheeks, and some on the rose. In this next slide, a close-up of the hand, you can see 3 values blocked in with the tone of the canvas showing through. Very simple shapes with the knuckles and the joints in mind. Another close-up of the hand, you can see that I often draw circles at each joint to help connect the fingers so they won't look like sausages. I draw the pad of the hand first with simple abstract shape, and the fingers as a fan or hole before carving out each finger. I added blue tones on the jaw and the side of the nose, and the fingers and the bottom of the hand. In this darker version, you can see that a little hot color in the palm of the hand with about 4 values, all still very mosaically applied. The rose was covered with quick, bold strokes, and I used the same color in the edge of the hair by the temple and the cheeks, and a little bit on the edge of the roof. The detail on the sleeve, you can see it's still not much. There's dark, medium, and light with the tones showing through. The flowers and the vine were applied very loosely here against the dark. Since the paint was applied thin, it was easy to add these on top of the dark without getting muddy. In this comparison of the 2 heads, you can see that my version is not exact by any means. I often like to use a grayscale image towards the end of my paintings to compare, and you can see that there's not enough dark under her chin or in her hair. The hair is very blocky and not blended much at this point. I do use a mongoose brush later to go back and soften my edges. You can see the tone of the canvas showing through the fabric on her shoulder. I'll keep that and use that in the future as an experience for how to tone my canvas and use that tone. In this close-up of the hand and rose, you note that there's a lot of hot color in the palm of the hand, especially when you hold fingers up to the light. You'll see the translucent quality of skin. That hot color just gives the painting life. You can see these edges are softened. I've softened these with a mongoose brush, and in some cases soften the edge with another intermediate tone. This is the close-up of the flowers. You can see they're placed in very quickly with not a lot of detail. There's another close-up of the fabric. You can see how the orange tone is showing through. The pottery down at the bottom was placed in very quickly, very crude. It's not done in much detail, and I'll leave it that way just because this was such a quick study. Here's a shot on the easel at about midnight. My lighting wasn't really good at that time of night for photographs. There's a little glare. But it was interesting to take photos throughout this process, just to see my own progress. Here's the finished painting. I would refine this a little more probably quite a bit more, but I enjoyed doing it so much in just an alla prima, all at once session that I think I'll just leave it like it is. There are a lot of things different in this one, especially with the background. I didn't develop it. Here's my palette at the end of my session. You can see I used a gray palette paper with only about 7 or 8 colors. And this was all of my mixing area. I don't think I've ever worked so neatly, and maybe it had something to do with the quickness that I worked. Here's a comparison to the original painting by Waterhouse. You can see that mine is quite different, but I think I captured the essence of it, particularly the skin tones. That's really what I wanted to learn from in mimicking his strokes and looking at how he applied the paint. I hope you enjoyed this step-by-step walk through my alla prima painting session. For more information on my artwork or classes, you can visit me at Christine Pilkinton Studios on Facebook or my website, portraitcreations.com.